John Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
And thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Saturday. New time. We're glad you're with us. We are going to talk about something you're going to be hearing about over the next several months leading up to the November election, and that is dark money or dirty money. There is an amendment that likely will be a constitutional amendment in Arizona that you'll be voting on if it is not stopped by a lawsuit that's currently pending, and if the signatures are enough. And it looks like they are, but we'll see. It is officially called the Stop Political Dirty Money Amendment. This amendment, if passed by you in November, could have a drastic impact on the money spent to influence elections in this state. And it would apply to anyone who is contributing $2,500 or more to oppose or support candidates or any issue. To talk about it today, we're going to debate it with Terry Goddard, former Arizona Attorney General. He is the chairman of the Stop Political Dirty Money Amendment. And Jon Gabriel, on the left of your screen, he's a Mesa resident, editor-in-chief of Ricochet.com. Thank you for showing up and talking about it. I suspect you're going to be called on to do this many times before November, so thank you. Let me start with you, Terry.
Riveting television.
Hey, listen, this is a big issue.
Yes,
a lot of states have tried. At least cities have tried to do it.
Cities have tried. States have not.
States have not. So this would be we'd be breaking ground here. Is dark money dirty money?
Yes, it is. It's the same. It's a rebranding, I guess you would call it. I think dark is morally neutral. Dirty is not. Dirty basically says what I think the impact of anonymous cash in elections is. It's a pollution of our political system. It basically means the voters see an ad, and in Arizona we have literally thousands of them, more than in any other state in the country by total volume and by total dollars. And so we're in many ways the petri dish for this experiment.
Well, you mentioned the dollars, and let me point out, in the 2014 election, out of $28 million in non-candidate spending for statewide candidates, $18 million was dark money. Yeah. That put Arizona at the top of the heap in terms of percentage of money spent.
It absolutely did. And that's the reason I think Arizona has to take a stand to stop this, because it is across the country, but we have bigger influence in Arizona than in any other state. Okay,
John, give me your take. Is dark money dirty money?
They're using them as equivalents, but I think in a way both are pejorative terms. What they are private donations, non-publicly disclosed donations, and I believe they're morally neutral and should be treated that way. To call something dirty money because somebody donates $1,000 to their favorite candidate, some retiree or something like that, and she just wants to keep her name private, I think there's nothing wrong with that. They're getting involved in the political process, and that's healthy. And I can definitely understand massive gifts from huge corporations raising a lot of people's concerns and raising the need for transparency, which is a noble goal. However, I think a lot of smaller players are going to be caught up in this whose privacy should be protected.
Okay, people on the surface of it, and the polling's pretty strong in Arizona that they want to outlaw so-called dark money. But there is another side to this, and I want to ask you specifically about the history of a Brandon Ike. He was a tech superstar in the Silicon Valley. He helped create Mozilla. What happened to him?
Well, it was found out he was promoted to CEO of the company he helped found, and it was found out that I believe it was 8 years earlier he had donated to Proposition 8
in
California, which outlawed same-sex marriage, which coincidentally was the same position Barack Obama had at the time, Hillary Clinton had at the time, and he agreed with them. Well, when they found this out, the courts tossed it out, and that's why same-sex marriage is legal in California. But once the crowd found this out, they ousted him from his position, basically, demanding his resignation. Now he's off at a completely different company. But again and again, we see, especially with the rise of social media, we're seeing so many people attacked and outed just because they have the quote-unquote wrong position on an issue. And that's what
Other examples out there?
Other examples, we have the John Doe cases in Wisconsin, where people who are donating to groups supporting Governor Scott Walker when they were trying to impeach him Their houses were raided, their laptops were confiscated, and they were just embroiled in court cases for, I believe it was about 18 months until they cleared their names. The courts threw out the charges, but it's just this harassment. In that case, the process was the punishment, and they were basically, thrown an inside pitch saying, okay, back away from the political process a little bit.
Terry, you're a former Arizona Attorney General. You know very well protecting civil rights of people. Is there a civil rights argument to giving people some amount of protection if they want to donate to a campaign and not facing some kind of scorn or backlash?
Read a quote. It basically says, the price our people have traditionally been willing to pay for self-governance is harsh criticism. Requiring people to stand up in public for their political acts fosters civic courage, without which democracy is doomed. I, for my part, do not look forward to a society which, thanks to the Supreme Court, campaigns anonymously. This does not resemble the home of the brave.
Who wrote it?
Antonin Scalia. Basically,
one of the
this
most conservative
is one of the most
we've
conservative
had.
justices around.
This is interesting because
essentially what we have is a political democracy where the critical factor, in my opinion, and I think many, many people share this, is that you know all the facts about the debate you're watching. If it's a political debate, you know who's on which side. And what we have because of dirty money is massive amounts of advertising that the voters are subjected to where they have no clue. You have a name at the bottom of the ad, which is some kind of a nonsense name that sounds great.
Or on the radio, it's blah, 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 blah,
exactly. But it usually
it
more than that in print and on the radio and on television, you'll have an ad that says Americans for good things or for a better future. You don't know what that stands for. And basically, it's a way of hiding the participation by corporations and by billionaires who want to influence your vote. And in order to have a knowledgeable vote, we need to know who it is that's trying to sell us.
You've got it on both sides, though.
Pitch.
You've got, for the Democrats, for instance, it's Soros. For the Republicans, it's the Koch brothers, generally.
There is no question. It is the
equal
offenders
opportunity
are on
offenders.
both sides, and this proposition, the outlaw dirty money proposition, would apply to both sides, absolutely impartially. And that's why the supporters of this proposition are independents and Republicans and Democrats. I mean, it's
John,
across the board.
I hear you saying the devil's in the details.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Am I getting that right?
That's my concern about it, and it's like we're switching affiliations politically because I love Antonin Scalia, of course, as any good conservative / libertarian should, but John Paul Stevens, who was a liberal on the court in 1995, basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, but that privacy is the antidote to the tyranny of the majority. And his concerns at that time I share as well. I think the former Attorney General and myself both we're concerned about transparency issues. What I'm concerned about is not these huge corporations who might be pouring millions or billions into a campaign, but rather the smaller donors who donate $2,500, whose name will end up on a list and might be targeted for harassment.
You're talking about the McIntyre versus Ohio Elections Commission decision in 1995. Where is the Supreme Court on this issue? I mean, there were even the founding fathers in the Federalist Papers there was some degree of anonymity going on. My phone is going off. That's great, and I know it's my kids. I am
Dad, we need to hear from you.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, I apologize. I am guilty as charged of cell phone violations. Terry,
I love it's you and not me.
I know.
I was just thinking the whole time, is that my phone?
If you're the host, can you get away with it? You're all right.
Yes, you can. It's your show. Congratulations.
Okay, so.
But it's also transparent. We know it was your phone.
That's right. The Federalists, some of the Federalist writings were anonymous. I mean, there has been some anonymity in political speech
that was in
since
a tradition following the American Revolution, where sometimes it could cost your life to be on the side that the Federalist was taking. I really don't think that's relevant. What we're talking about here is not personal views. Of course, we have the right to express that in any way we want. What we're talking about is advertising. What we're talking about is contributions to promote a view at a massive scale. So it's not the right to speak, it's the right to speak with a huge microphone that we're talking about. And the court has been absolutely consistent to say that when you use the microphone, you got to tell the people who it is that's paying.
John?
Well, I think, as I've said, I think it's a concern, but what you're going to have is private citizens being caught up in this huge dragnet, as well-meaning as it might be. That's got to be a concern for people. And I think, too, when we talk about Publius writing a lot of the articles in...
That's exactly what I was referring to.
In the Federalist Papers, I look at free speech and donating to candidates you prefer. They're both part of the political process. We have a secret ballot, and if you would like to donate some money to a candidate that you prefer, that's basically you registering your vote in cash rather than in the ballot.
Terry, and you're...
Yes, and today in Arizona, and for certainly my entire lifetime, if you make a contribution of over $50, you're going to disclose. You're going to put your name, you're going to put your address, you're going to put your employer, or if you're retired. That's been the law forever. So what Jon is talking about is an exception, carving out an exception for a very small group of people who happen to be very powerful. They have 501c4 operations. They have a special legal niche, which our legislature in Arizona has basically made beyond the pale. Right now, if you have any kind of campaign, if you run for office or if you're forming a committee to support somebody who's running for office, you have to file with the Secretary of State. You have to do regular disclosure. But our legislature said if you're a 501c4, you don't even have to file with the Secretary of State. You just spend the money, and nobody knows who it is that spent it. So that's who we're talking about. We're not talking about the general public. We already have to disclose. You and I have to disclose. It's a very small exception for very powerful people, and I think that's wrong.
As we go to break, is there a party that wins or loses with this? In other words, would voters look at this and say, oh, okay, this is a measure to help Democrats, or it's a measure to help Republicans? Would there be a political fallout of this that you believe tips the balance one way or the other?
I don't think there would be partisan fallout at all, and it wouldn't frankly concern me. I don't belong to either party, so it wouldn't particularly concern me if it did.
You're a registered independent.
I'm a registered independent, and definitely people on both sides are doing it. You have George Soros on one side, you have the Koch brothers on the other, and partisans on each side try to demonize the other and say that money's unfair, but our money's okay. I believe that the way that this proposed amendment is written, it isn't partisan. It isn't trying to single out one party so the other party can get a leg up.
Okay,
Thank you, Jon. It was.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the Tempe experience. Tempe voted, residents voted there to try to force disclosure, and then the Arizona legislature got in the middle of it and said nope, and the governor signed it to stop it. Back in a minute on Newsmaker Sunday, talking about dark money. Terry Goddard calls it dirty money. We'll let you decide. Still ahead. Back on Newsmaker Saturday, and if I say Sunday, you've got to understand old habits die hard. It's the longest running program on television, so or one of them. Pets on Parade might be have me by that much.
But you're ahead of Wallace and Ladmo, right?
Yes. Terry Goddard, former Attorney General, Jon Gabriel, Mesa resident, editor-in-chief of Ricochet.com. We are discussing dark or dirty money, whichever way you want to put it. The Supreme Court, when we got the decision on Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 5-4 decision. They basically said that the government has no business regulating political speech. So what you're trying to do by disclosing what everyone who donates, that you would know who they are, it would be there for the public to see, is what you're doing on a collision course with what the Supreme Court said in Citizens United.
Not at all. And in fact, I just read to you a quote from Justice Scalia, who was one of the 5-member majority in that. The man who wrote the opinion, Justice Kennedy, dealt with that exact issue because Citizens United, the plaintiff, raised the question. They said, if we have to disclose the names of our donors, it's going to have a chilling effect on their willingness to donate. And Justice Kennedy said in a couple of sentences, A, you didn't prove that. B, so there's no evidence before the court that that happens. Second, even if you did, we believe the voter's right to know is more important than protecting the identity of a contributor. We're not talking about their right to speak. We're talking about whether or not when they contribute, they have to tell you who they are. And so Justice Kennedy was an outspoken proponent of full disclosure.
Now, even during the civil rights era, people who supported civil rights in the South and wanted to do it anonymously, if they were found out as donating to these causes, there were ramifications. There were bad outcomes, right?
Yeah, there definitely were. And part of my concern, too, is just how technology has developed. We see it every day, it seems, on Twitter. There's another villain that everybody's yelling at and screaming at and trying to get fired from their jobs. We see this with Brendan Eich, which was several years ago, but now we're having restaurants refusing service to this person. If somebody serves, say, a Trump official, which happened to a restaurant, I believe it was in Houston, They're mobbed, they're complained about, they're attacked online, everybody boycott this place. And people have weaponized themselves. There's been a lot of great things with the internet, but they've really weaponized this information to bring down people for disagreeing with them. I've had photos of my home and home address posted to Twitter by anonymous sources just because I disagreed speech-wise. And I don't want to give people that
So you think
power.
anonymity is needed now more than ever?
Yeah, I think anonymity,
say.
right, and I think it's a right. Someone like me, I'm out there in public, I'll sign my articles, people know who I am and apparently now know where I live. But when you give a donation and you're a private doctor, you're a restaurateur, you should have the freedom to give to whomever you like, on the left, on the right, someone who wants to get rid of both parties without being concerned about somebody tracking down a government website, finding out your information and harassing you over
You
it.
don't worry
Jon,
about that?
That's blaming the flashlight for the cockroaches. I mean, basically, you're talking about bad behavior, and you deal with bad behavior. You don't deal with the fundamental right of voters to know who it is that's paying for a political ad. It seems to me if there is bad behavior by people, we need to deal with that. But you don't do it by limiting a voter's rights. You don't do it by changing the basic context in which we work. And right now, what you see is a huge level of distrust and disagreement with our governmental process. Our whole democracy is at stake at the moment. One of the reasons is because so much of the debate is sacred.
We've got 1 minute. Outcome of this, if this were to pass, and you believe that the signatures will be valid, you believe that
I believe we're
the
on a
court
good
challenge
track,
on the
but
petition
nobody
gatherers
can predict.
is okay? John?
Knock on wood.
Yeah, I believe it'll be on the ballot.
You believe it'll be on the ballot. It's unnamed as of right now, but it is a constitutional amendment change to the Arizona Constitution. This is not a small matter.
No.
This is a big deal.
No, because
what do
we
we
didn't
get
want the legislature messing with it.
in 15 seconds, Terry? What do we get as an outcome if this were to pass?
You get transparency. You get to know who it is
Better
that's behind
governance?
those ads. I think you get more honest government. I think you get to hold your elected officials accountable for who's supporting them. I hope that eventually elected officials will demand, and candidates will demand that the support that they get is totally out in the open, so the voters can make a knowledgeable choice.
I started with Terry, let me end with John. What is the downside of this in your view?
I believe what you'll have is 1,500 words added to the Constitution, more regulations on people's privacy. We hear so many times, especially from our friends on the left, about the need for a right to privacy. I'm extending that merely to people's donations. I think people don't need to notify the government what they spend their money on, whether it's political speech or if they want to buy a new car. It's frankly none of the government's business.
I appreciate it. Jon Gabriel, Editor-in-Chief of Ricochet, and Terry Goddard, former Arizona Attorney General, former Phoenix Mayor. Thank you both very much for being here. When we come back on Newsmaker Saturday, Bret Baier of Fox News, we discuss everything politics and what's going on in Washington, and John McCain's future. Back in a moment on Newsmaker Saturday. Thank you, John. Joining me now for the rest of Fox 10 Newsmaker Saturday, Bret Baier, who is the anchor of Special Report and Fox's chief political anchor. Bret, great to see you. Thanks for spending some time with us. A quick thing with all of the special elections and the primaries going on, the big blue wave that has been so much discussed. What are you seeing? What do you think?
Well, listen, I think we have a little bit of time to go before you get to November. And as we know in politics, and especially here in Washington, it's like drinking from a fire hose day to day. So a lot can happen between now and then. How people are feeling about their own situation economically, what's happening abroad, a lot can change. But right now, if you looked at the map, Democrats are poised to take the House. I mean, if the election were held this weekend, it would be probably Democrats taking control of the House of Representatives and probably Republicans holding on to control and maybe even gaining a seat or two in the U.S. Senate. I mean, that's where the picture is right now, but a lot can change.
Bret, do you believe that it's a foregone conclusion if Democrats were to capture the House that there would be articles of impeachment drawn against the president? Because it is, after all, a political exercise, not really a criminal one.
Right. I think that is a real debate within the Democratic Party. Clearly, before the election, they don't want to talk about that. But in the halls of Congress, that is being talked about. And where it would go really depends on what comes out in the Robert Mueller investigation. One would think that before we get to the November election, that you're going to see some kind of report, some kind of resolution to at least a part of that investigation. And that would lead you to think, if Democrats took control, that it would be a political effort if they found something in there. I think that you're not going to hear much about that from Democrats before the election. You may hear a lot about it from Republicans who are saying that will happen no matter what.
The chances, though, even if you got articles in the House, say the Democrats took the House, they get articles of impeachment. Even if you went to a trial in the Senate, 2/3 vote, that's a heavy lift, probably isn't going to happen with the current makeup of the U.S. Senate. So would that potentially put Democrats in some peril to do a fruitless exercise going into the 2020 presidential election?
Yeah, in fact, there have been some opinion pieces that said that this is kind of the backstop for Donald Trump ahead of 2020, and that's he would want to run against some, enemy, being this alleged impeachment effort. That said, we don't know what we don't know, John. A lot can happen in what we learn about this investigation, what we learn about the other side of the investigation, and the Inspector General looking at the early efforts to look into the Trump campaign.
Bret, I wanted to ask you quickly about this bias in the media discussion that President Trump really has focused a spotlight on. I'm thinking ahead to the 2020 presidential debates. To me, the list is getting very, very thin on who the journalists might be, who could be fair arbiters in a presidential debate that both sides would feel comfortable with, because everybody's showing their card, tipping their hand as to which way they lean.
I agree with you. I think that some journalists who have previously not done that in this environment have decided to go a little bit over their skis at times and been much more opinionated than perhaps many thought they would be. I think, and our view here, is that we present it, and it's not just a slogan. We give you what this side says, we give you what this side says, we give you the facts around it, and then the viewer makes the decision how they feel about that. That's where my mindset is going into every day in this crazy town that we cover. But I agree with you. There are some journalists who have decided that they want to make their opinions known throughout how they report things.
Bret, here in Arizona, Republicans are being very, very careful concerning John McCain's health. Nobody wants to say a lot. We're kind of on this, how do I put it? We're kind of riding a situation where there is really not a lot of disclosure with Senator McCain's medical situation. So we're kind of on the honor system here. There are not many calls, at least publicly from public officials, for him to resign, considering big things coming ahead. Supreme Court nominees, Brett Kavanaugh, that's on the table. Are you hearing in Washington something different? Are Republicans starting to say it may be time for John McCain to step aside?
I mean, I've heard some of that up on Capitol Hill, not a lot. It's not like a clamoring. The race that you're looking at for governor, obviously the current governor seems in a good position, but if that race gets tight, that becomes an issue, obviously. If Republicans don't hold on to that seat, Senator McCain and his positioning, who appoints the next senator, should he not step down, all of that is being talked about, but not in a very public way up here. And you're right, it's we don't get a lot of updates. We just hope and wish that he's doing well.
Finally,
I think, he's in the middle of a lot of controversy when you hear the president and others, but he's well respected up here in Washington.
No question. Finally, Bret, I want to circle back to a question that I'm sure you get. I get it all the time. People assume because we work for Fox that people tell us what to report. I can look in the camera dead on and with full honesty. I have never been told by these folks ever what to report or how to report it. On your end, is that the same situation?
100%. I can look into the same camera and say that. It's never a top-down thing on the news side of the house here. It is a bottom-up situation.
Do you think people believe it?
And it's tough. Sometimes it takes a lot of time to make sure, one viewer at a time, that they see that we're reporting things fairly. I tell people to watch the show 3 times and then write me an email or a tweet or a Facebook post and let me know what you think if we covered it fairly. A lot of people paint with a broad brush, but there's 2 sides. There's the news side and there's the opinion side. Just like a newspaper has a news page and an opinion page. And that's how we run it, and hopefully people see that.
Bret Baier, continued success. Great to see you, my friend, and we'll discuss further as we go along in the election cycle. Great to see you.
All right, John.
Okay,
Thanks.
Bret, thanks. Bret Baier. Thanks to Bret Baier. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.